Hey y'all! We here at Hot Girl Summer understand the importance of a balanced gamer diet. A glass of Mountain Bull, cereal, at all times of day, cool, crisp Doritos. And with 81% of gamers eating while playing, and 92% of gamers eating while watching. The pasture's green, the gamers must graze, and brands are ready to bring home the herd. But I wish gamer food looked like this.
That's good. I like the honey.
Video games are just like real life. Food is one of the best parts. Though unlike real life, virtual food is instantly gratifying, non-perishable, and often prepared for you, which it desperately needs to compensate for its lack of taste. But games can be more than unrealistic standards set for slow-cooked saffron rice. Sometimes, every so often, video games can go beyond aesthetics and use their mechanics to, teach you stuff. And Zelda teaches you how to cook. There are a lot of videos trying to cook Zelda recipes, but Zelda's cooking magic lies not in the ingredients, but in the technique. Of course Link has kitchen skills. He's the perfect man, and his food philosophy breaks down into 3 core practices: sourcing, balance, and hospitality. Hyrule is a whimsical cornucopia where Link stocks his climate-controlled hammer space with whatever he wants. In other words, Link can eat just like I do. A fridge is just hammer space for radishes. Link has the freedom to eat anything, and yet he chooses to eat with the seasons, because there is a reward in it, a status effect. It's the same for me. Seasonal eating can help compensate for the weather. It encourages eating a variety of foods at peak nutritional potency. Link works with 5 ingredients max, because he's flexing. The fewer ingredients, the more the technique. The 5-ingredient limit keeps from overcrowding the pan. This promotes the Maillard reaction, a chemical process between proteins, sugars, and heat that produces food's golden color, nutty aroma, and umami taste. Zelda's color-coded ingredients can be layered to achieve a status effect of greater potency than smashing together 5 of a kind. Mostly. What is in those fish? Whatever the case, they're delicious, and everyone knows it. Hyruleans reward more for Link's cooking efforts than for individual ingredients. Some of Link's best characterization happens at the cooking pot, humming to himself, elated with the dish he's created. Even the simplest meal has its loving garnish. People who love cooking made this game. What's their secret? What's their perspective? What framework informed the devs' decisions? How do they cook? What do they eat? Japanese cuisine. And there's a traditional guide to Japanese cuisine, but to go further, we're going to need some Japanese vocab. Wa is the kanji for peace, harmony, Japan, and Japanese style. Shoku is the kanji for peace, eating, appetite, and portion. When they're put together, they read Washoku, Japanese cuisine. Though there is more to the story of this pleasant word's definition.
That's good.
In 2013, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, officially placed Washoku on the representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Washoku's not just culture, it's certified culture. To celebrate Washoku's designation, former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe took to YouTube and invited the world to try Japan's good food. Washoku's official UNESCO title is Washoku, Traditional Dietary Structures of the Japanese, notably for the celebration of New Year, or as Prime Minister Abe called it, the Traditional Dietary Structures of the Japanese. This video and UNESCO highlight 3 main elements of Washoku: sourcing local, seasonal ingredients, respecting Japan's natural harvest cycles, balancing the meal with the principle Ichiju Sansai, 1 soup, 3 sides, along with the staple rice and the hidden but never forgotten condiment of pickles. Home cooking and hospitality, with daily and celebratory meals alike prepared with taste, nutritional value, and appearance in mind. So let Zelda lead you to do some research, find an authentic Japanese restaurant, and have a holistic, philosophically informed, certified cultural meal yourself, said the Japanese governing body. The 3 dishes and a soup, plus rice and pickles, I do most of the cooking in the house, brag, and I mostly enjoy it, brag. I like cooking and I will burn myself out. Let's assume that the rice and pickles are done in advance. Think of the prep work. Think of the dishes. Now, my culture is a crock pot of chili, so maybe this is a Dandori issue. Washoku looks delicious, and I want to learn how Japanese home cooks make these meals every day. 37.9% of Japanese people surveyed in 2022 reported cooking at home only once a week or less over the past 2 years. Most single Japanese people eat out or go to convenience stores, and those that do cook at home often meal prep. Cookyen is Japan's 19th most popular food and drink site with 3.9 million monthly views. This recipe site lists refrigeration days alongside cook time. Cookyen's ingredient lists tend to be very short, and preparation is very easy, and the meals yield 1 to 2 servings. These are daily recipes. Compare this to Just One Cookbook, a recipe site aimed at Americans learning Japanese cooking. Both sites host recipes for saburo-don, or ground chicken bowl. While similar, Cookyen lists fewer ingredients and requires fewer tools. Also note that Just One Cookbook tags saburo-don as classic washoku. Just One Cookbook introduces foreigners to Japanese cuisine, so maybe these aromatics have to be listed out, whereas for a Japanese home cook, these would be obvious garnishes, like mayo. Oh yeah, I am nasty about mayo. So pickles can be inferred, and the rice is involved. Maybe you quickly heated some miso.
It's chewy. It's really nice. I think it'll be good with the cucumbers.
This is Japanese food made by Japanese home cooks. But is it washoku? Is it washoku if it isn't plated like washoku? Do modern Japanese have a skill issue too? What if the peas aren't in season? If washoku represents traditional Japanese cooking, how did people, like Link, do this over one cooking fire without refrigeration? Intellectual Brian Gilbert figured this out 3 years ago. You don't. Washoku gave me exactly what I wanted, a well-defined, historically supported food system that I could easily map onto Zelda's mechanics. I found many sites touting the health benefits and the aesthetic pleasures of washoku, but nothing could answer my core question. Then I came across the book Branding Japanese Food from Meibutsu to Washoku. Dr. Katsujina Chifurita and Yasuhara Miho dismantled my idealism. Because of this book, I am a little less of a weeb. God bless him. Now let's get dismantled. Did you know that rice has been a Japanese staple food for less than 100 years? As of 2021, Japan's rice self-sufficiency was at 98%. Rice is the only food item that Japan is currently self-sufficient in producing. Average per capita consumption of rice reached its peak in Japan at over 360 grams per day in 1956, 1959, and 1961, and has declined ever since, dropping to less than 60 grams per day by 2015. Rice's popularity in the late 50s is a direct result of World War II rationing. Starting February 1942, the government entitled every citizen to a daily ration of approximately 322 grams of partially polished rice. The government's price on this producer's rice, purchased directly from the farmer, was twice the amount paid to the tenants by their landowners. Rationing promoted rice to #1 staple food status. Misconceptions on rice's staple status can be seen all the way back to the 1930s, when nativist ethnographer Yanagita Kunio observed that while many people today in the 1930s assume that the Japanese people as a whole have always eaten rice as their principal food, it was formerly reserved for special days. Only 50 years earlier, in the 1980s, barley, wheat, sweet potatoes, and millet made up half of Japan's staple food consumption. Scholars agree that the upper class and urbanites ate rice. Average Edo urbanites ate mainly rice and pickles, with miso soup and a side dish at lunch and dinner, usually of simmered vegetables, seafood, tofu and broth, and the occasional fish. However, there is no consensus on what the majority population of farmers ate as their staple. A farmer's diary from 1845 lists barley with miso for breakfast, mixed rice and barley with daikon leaves at lunch, and a dark miso with wheat dumplings and vegetables, or grilled wheat flour pancakes with grated daikon for dinner. Historical Japanese diets are as miso-centric or barley-centric or radish-centric as they are rice-centric. And that calls Ichiju Sansai in for questioning. Shokuiku, Japan's national food education, began promoting the Ichiju Sansai model in 2005. Ichiju Sansai originated from the ceremonial banquets that had been the dominant form of elite dining since the medieval period. One soup, one side dish was the norm in pre-modern Japan, even among upper-class households. Ichiju sansai is historically impractical, not only to prepare, but also to
We
eat.
see the so-called chabudai, the table with low legs, and then from the 1970s, Western style table with long legs. But before the 1920s, people used hakozen. Basically, these were individual trays, but when you look at the sizes of those trays, there was no space for any more than 3 dishes.
3-dish feasts, rice and pickles included, gained a modern popularity in the form of kaiseki, a multi-course restaurant meal which could be best labeled as Japanese hot cuisine, or as a slightly less flamboyant formal meal served before the tea ceremony, depending on the ideograms used. The principles of kaiseki are: use the best quality ingredients, giving preference to ingredients in season, avoid the repetition of cooking techniques in the same meal, serve each dish at exactly the right temperature, devote equal attention to taste and appearance of each dish, make sure that the food is always served in harmony with its surroundings.
Can you tell the difference between kaiseki and washoku? The Japanese government says you can't, and so do I.
Kaiseki is a professional cookery. Washoku nomination that the Japanese government presented to UNESCO was talking about home food that the Japanese cook. After they received the UNESCO approval, they started promoting kaiseki under the name of washoku, which as a food historian I find just appalling.
Washoku is a modern Japanese word first appearing in the late 19th century, when neologisms with the prefix wa, meaning Japan, Japanese or Japanese style, and yo, meaning Western or foreign, began to emerge in response to the encroachment of Western culture on Japan.
So we juxtaposed the content of the Washoku nomination submitted to the UNESCO by the Japanese government with historical data that we collected from cookbooks, etiquette manuals, menus, newspaper articles, and so forth. The degree of manipulation, we were really flabbergasted by it.
Early washoku hits lacked any connection to home cooking. When the word did appear, it was often paired with terms yoshuku, yofu no ryori, or seiyo ryori, all three carrying the meaning of Western-style food. 20th century writers described Japanese food overseas or in intercultural contexts using the word washoku. Washoku denoted what Japanese athletes ate while abroad at the Olympics, or food served to foreign dignitaries. These earliest examples of washoku contain no reference to home cooking, daily food, ichiju sansai, or a codified food historical system of any kind. Washoku is defined simply as Japanese food.
Washoku is presented as a cultural heritage that is owned by all Japanese. And if it's owned by all Japanese, that means that washoku is in principle the food cooked at home. But when we start looking at the use and the meaning of the word in the course of the 20th century, it never actually was used in the sense of home-cooked meal.
Japan's government manipulated washoku's definition from a general culinary term into brand name cultural heritage. That's what UNESCO makes. Brand name culture. And washoku's path to UNESCO is full of twists. Cultural heritage designation is a 20-month process of appeals and documentation with finalization in March. UNESCO prefers to designate widespread common culture and tends to dismiss bids with aristocratic connotations. 1 year before washoku's bid, UNESCO rejected Korea's food-based bid for failing to prove broad community support. Basically, it came across as too highfalutin, and so it didn't fly. In the fall, 6 months before Japan's due date, the government collected several hundred community consent forms from the Japanese public to satisfy UNESCO's standards. However, when the authors read through the 1,000+ pages of interviews and surveys publicly available on UNESCO's website, they found discrepancies in the document titles.
It says distinctive Japanese cuisine with traditional features centered on kaiseki. It's a very different angle, because kaiseki is an aestheticized meal produced by professional chefs. Washoku is being propagated and presented as home-cooked meal, which is also historically inaccurate.
Maybe no one at UNESCO knew how to read Japanese. Or maybe they just didn't bother to read through these pieces of paper. But the statements collected from September through November of 2013 gave citizen consent for a bid on kaiseki, not washoku. On November 4th, meeting minutes reveal Chairman Kumakura proposed a shift away from kaiseki to washoku. The very idea of nominating washoku for inclusion on the UNESCO list had crystallized less than 6 months before the March 31st deadline.
The committee for putting together the nomination for the UNESCO, the Japanese. There you see a discussion between different members, and one of the people says, yeah, I don't actually understand what is the difference between washoku and Nihon ryori. Wouldn't it be confusing? And then another says, well, it is, they use the word kikiyasui. It is easy to the ear. The foreigners can pronounce it, so it will be good for branding purposes. This is what I find most problematic. When you now Google washoku, hits that will come will be related to the UNESCO heritage and the definition, which is inconsistent with the historical facts.
The committee began rebranding the lofty, aestheticized technical kaiseki into their vision of a home-cooked, traditional, widespread washoku, complete with photographs emphasizing community rather than the cuisine itself. By December 2013, all mention of kaiseki vanishes from documentation, and Japan celebrated in March 2014 as washoku was added to UNESCO's Cultural Heritage List. Events like the annual Washoku World Challenge began blurring the meanings between kaiseki and washoku just a week after the UNESCO certification. In the news, washoku was the word, but kaiseki provided the visuals in both international and Japanese publications. Washoku is a piece of, and this is English vocab this time, Gastro-diplomacy, fabricated to brand and sell Japanese culture. I was so excited when I first found the research pieces for this video. Washoku felt like the perfect answer to Zelda's cooking mechanics. I was learning through a video game. It just felt like such a lovely cultural exchange. But Washoku is a tourism board's vision of history, presenting Japan as thoughtful, seasonal, and traditional, because Japan wants to brand itself as thoughtful, seasonal, and traditional. But is there anything wrong with that? If the Japanese people want to share this culture, and tourists are willing to pay for it, what's the problem with washoku? At the end of branding, the authors decry the Japanese food educational community for remaining silent on washoku. But Eric C. Rath, Japanese food historian and professor at the University of Kansas, who is cited in branding, states in his review of the book that food historians don't speak up about washoku because they view it objectively as advertising copy, not fact. In the same way that dentists don't personalize claims that 4 out of 5 of them prefer a certain brand of chewing gum. Which may be the case, but I'm not an academic. I wasn't able to see washoku objectively. The marketing worked. Everyone is always advertising. Even something official sounding as UNESCO or seemingly historical as washoku is advertising. Historians may have the context to dismiss washoku. I don't. Who could? Washoku has the support of the Japanese government. It's unsurprising that, in the name of history and information, the dominant voices in English-speaking Japanese cuisine spaces parrot the same washoku talking points over and over. And then that begs the question, does Zelda teach you cooking? Yeah. There's really no other cooking advice to give. Japan didn't invent seasonal eating, giving thanks, or the balanced breakfast. A connection to food is something we can all share. When I watch Link smile over a pot of food that he's foraged, I fall in love with cooking. And there's only one scholar better than love. And it's hate. Washoku is an excellent product. It's not an ancient form. It's kaiseki from the 50s, rebranded in the 2010s. It's a monolith angled to distract from the stone it was cut from. But history isn't just monuments and feasts. It's also strip mines and radishes.